1970 was the peak of muscle car power, with automakers pushing limits like never before. Bigger engines, more speed, and record-breaking performance made this the ultimate year for fast cars. But while some became legends, others stayed in the shadows. Just as fast, just as powerful, but rarely talked about. Number 15, 1971. Ford Torino Cobra, 429 SCJ. The 1971 Ford Torino Cobra was fast, really fast. It covered a quarter mile in 14.5 seconds, hitting a speed of 102 miles per hour. But for some reason, it never became a big name in the car world. Maybe it got lost among all the other Torino models Ford made that year. Ford made small changes to its cars in 1971. It dropped the Fairlane and Falcon names and focused on the Torino. There were 14 versions of the Torino. The basic one was called Torino, and it came as a 2-door hardtop, 4-door sedan, and 4-door station wagon. A step up was the Torino 500, which had more styles, including a sports roof version. The fanciest one was the Brougham, designed for comfort, and there was also the Torino Squire, a station wagon with extra details. For speed, there were two choices, Torino GT and Torino Cobra. The GT had a 302 cubic inch engine and a sporty look, but the real fast one was the Cobra. It came with a 351 cubic inch engine, but Ford also offered a 429 cubic inch Cobra jet engine for more power. However, new engine rules meant slightly lower power compared to the year before. One test of a Torino Cobra with a 370 horsepower, 429 Cobra jet engine and automatic transmission showed a quarter-mile time of 15 seconds at 97 miles per hour. Another test, after some tuning, improved that to 14.5 seconds at 102 miles per hour. Ford built 326,463 Torinos in 1971, but only 1,613 GT convertibles and 3,054 Cobras were made. That might explain why the fast Torino never became a big name. It had great speed, but not enough people noticed. Number 14, 1970, AMC Rebel Machine. The 1970 AMC Rebel Machine was fast, reaching 60 miles per hour in 6.8 seconds, and covering a quarter mile in 14.4 seconds at 99 miles per hour. It had serious speed, yet it never became a household name like other muscle cars of its time. American Motors Corporation, known as AMC, was a smaller company competing against big names like Ford, Chevrolet, and Dodge. In 1970, it introduced the Rebel Machine, a car built for performance with a bold look. It had a 390 cubic inch engine, producing 340 horsepower and 430 pound-feet of torque. The car came with a 4-speed manual transmission with a Hurst shifter, and an automatic was available as an option. AMC launched the car in October 1969 at a major drag racing event in Dallas, Texas. The first 1,000 models came in a red, white, and blue paint job, while the rest of the 2,326 units were available in other colors. The car stood out, but it had tough competition from the Pontiac GTO, Dodge Charger, and Ford Mustang Mach-1. The Rebel Machine was designed to perform well. It had a suspension system that improved handling, with stronger rear coil springs and thicker anti-roll bars. Power-assisted front brakes helped with stopping after quick sprints. Inside, it had a Hurst shifter, special gauges, and unique trim to match its performance focus. Even with all these features, AMC did not sell many. The company tried again in 1971 with the Matador machine, built on a new design with a 401 cubic inch engine. However, times were changing and car makers started focusing on fuel economy instead of speed. The Rebel Machine had everything needed to be a muscle car legend, but it never got the attention it deserved. It was built for speed, but only a few people knew about it. Number 13, 1973, Pontiac Firebird Formula 455 SD. The 1973 Pontiac Firebird Trans Am SD 455 could reach 60 miles per hour in under 5.5 seconds and complete a quarter mile in 13.8 seconds. It was one of the fastest American cars of its time, yet few people talk about it today. By the early 1970s, muscle cars were in trouble. New emissions rules made engines weaker, and car companies started focusing on fuel economy instead of speed. Many thought the era of fast street cars was over, but Pontiac had other plans. Against all odds, it introduced the SD 455, a high-performance version of its 455 cubic inch engine, producing 310 horsepower. The Firebird SD455 was officially approved for sale, even with its powerful engine. It passed emissions tests like any other car, which was rare for something this fast. This only happened because the government considered it part of Pontiac's regular 455 engine family, skipping extra durability tests. On February 7, 1973, during a test in California, the car proved itself. It weighed 3,854 pounds, had an automatic transmission, and still managed to beat many sports cars of its time. The Chevrolet Corvette 454, Porsche 911, and Jaguar 512 were all considered fast, but the Firebird SD455 was quicker. Pontiac engineers fought hard to make this happen. Many people at General Motors thought it was a bad idea. Some said it would cost too much, while others thought it could never pass emissions tests. But a small team, including Herb Adams, Skip McCulley, and Tom Nell, refused to give up. They built an engine with stronger internal parts, improved airflow, and an upgraded oil system to handle high speeds. Only a few people remember the Firebird SD455, but it proved that fast cars were not finished. Even as the muscle car era was ending, Pontiac showed that speed was still possible. How do you like this video? Comment us. And be sure to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel to show your support. Number 12, 1970 Buick GSX Stage 1. The 1970 Buick GS 455 Stage 1 was one of the fastest American cars of its time, but almost nobody talks about it. Back then, muscle cars were all about how well you could tune and drive them, and not many people got their hands on this one. Buick only made 3,776 of these in 1970, with just 479 in the GSX version. Compared to the competition, that was a small number, which is probably why it didn't get as much attention. The Stage 1 package gave the GS 455 more power, with a hotter camshaft, stiffer valve springs, bigger valves, and a tweaked-up carburetor. It also came with a better oil pump, recalibrated ignition timing, and a stronger cooling system. The transmission options were a 3-speed manual, a 4-speed Muncie manual, or a 3-speed automatic. The automatic was tuned for faster shifts, and the 4-speed came with a Hurst shifter if you paid extra. Now, let's talk speed. In tests, a well-prepared Stage 1 did the quarter mile in 13.38 seconds at 105.5 miles per hour. Even a standard setup with normal tires and gearing ran it in around 13.8 seconds at about 101 miles per hour. That was faster than most muscle cars of the era. It went from 0 to 60 miles per hour in 6.5 seconds, which was quick for a big car like this. Despite being fast, it was easy to drive daily. It had power steering, a comfortable interior, and options like bucket seats and a tachometer. It weighed about 2 tons, and while that made it handle differently than lighter muscle cars, it was still fun to drive. The GS 455 Stage 1 could have been a bigger deal, but it came out at a time when muscle cars were everywhere, and Buick wasn't really known for performance, but those who knew about it understood how quick it really was. Even today, it remains one of the most overlooked muscle cars ever built. Number 11, 1977 Pontiac Can-Am. Most people know the famous muscle cars: Ford Mustang, Dodge Charger, and of course, Chevrolet Corvette and Camaro. But there's one car that people often forget, even though it was surprisingly quick for its time. It came out in the year 1977, and Pontiac called it the Can-Am. Now, why don't many people talk about it? Well, Pontiac only made around 1,377 of them. They had planned for 5,000, but a broken spoiler mold stopped production early. That made this car rare. The Can-Am was based on the Pontiac Le Mans Sport Coupe, but it had a stronger engine. Most of them came with a 400 cubic inch V8 engine, the same one used in the Trans Am. It made 180 horsepower and 325 pound-feet of torque. But if you lived in California or high-altitude areas, your Can-Am came with an Oldsmobile 403 cubic inch V8. That one had a little more power at 185 horsepower, but slightly lower torque at 320 pound-feet. Speed-wise, the Can-Am did 0 to 60 miles per hour in 10 seconds and finished the quarter mile in 17 seconds at 84 miles per hour. Those numbers don't sound fast today, but for a 1977 midsize car, that was a solid performance. Many cars of that time had lost power due to stricter emissions rules, but Pontiac gave the Can-Am some real muscle. Every Can-Am had a turbo hydromatic with 400 automatic transmissions. It had 3 forward gears with ratios of 2.48, 1.48, and 1.00. It also had a rear axle gear ratio of 2.41 to 1, which helped with fuel economy but didn't exactly boost acceleration. Also, it came with Pontiac's radial-tuned suspension, which meant better handling than most other muscle cars of the late 70s. It also had power front disc brakes and rear drum brakes, making it safer to stop. Most of them were painted cameo white with orange, red, and yellow stripes. The interior had 3 options: black, white, or firethorn red. It even had a Grand Prix dashboard, giving it a sportier feel inside. Even though the Can-Am wasn't the fastest car ever made, it stood out in 1977. But with so few made, many never got to see one, which is why it remains one of the fastest unknown cars of its time. Number 10, 1970. Mercury Cyclone Spoiler, 429 CJ. Most people remember Ford's muscle cars, the Mustang, Torino, and Fairlane. But Mercury, Ford's sister brand, had its own powerful machines. One of them was the 1970 Mercury Cyclone Spoiler, a car that was fast but never got the fame it deserved. Unlike earlier Mercury cars, which were often just fancy versions of Ford models, this one had its own unique design. It had a long, curvy body that looked different from Ford's fastbacks. It was based on the Cyclone GT, but the spoiler was built for speed. In fact, it was even better equipped than the Ford Torino Cobra, a car with a strong reputation. The Cyclone spoiler came with a 429 cubic inch V8 engine that made 370 horsepower. In the Torino Cobra, this engine was an extra cost option, but Mercury made it standard. The car also had a 4-speed manual transmission with a 3.50 to 1 rear axle ratio. A competition handling package and wide tires helped it stay stable at high speeds. If you wanted even more power, Mercury offered the drag pack. This upgraded the engine with stronger parts, giving it 375 horsepower. The drag pack also came with 2 stronger axle options: a 3.91 to 1 ratio or a 4.30 to 1 ratio with a Detroit locker differential for better traction. A 3-speed automatic transmission was also available for those who didn't want to shift gears manually. For speed, the Cyclone spoiler could go from 0 to 60 miles per hour in 6.2 seconds and run the quarter mile in 14.1 seconds at 100 miles per hour. Those numbers were serious for a car of its size in 1970. Beyond this, it had a functional hood scoop, a front chin spoiler, and a rear wing for better aerodynamics. Instead of flashy decorations, it had simple stripes and came in 6 bright colors, including blue, orange, yellow, green, coral, and platinum. Inside, it had a full set of round gauges angled toward the driver, including a tachometer, oil pressure, temperature, and amp meter. Ford's Torino only had warning lights and a strange horizontal tachometer. The Cyclone spoiler was a big car, measuring 209.9 inches long, about 3.7 inches longer than the Torino. It was also about 100 pounds heavier. This was Mercury's best muscle car. But with so much competition from Ford, it was easy to overlook. Even though it was one of the fastest cars of its time, not many people talk about it today. Number 9, 1971, Plymouth GTX, 446 barrel. The 1971 Plymouth GTX 440 plus 6 was one of the few muscle cars that did not slow down when others started losing power. It was strong, fast, and had a bold new design, but somehow, it never became as famous as some of its rivals. The GTX was the high-end version of the Roadrunner, which is part of Chrysler's midsize lineup. This year, they got a new body style called fuselage design, making the car curvier and more aggressive. The wheelbase was 1 inch shorter, but the rear track was 3 inches wider, helping with stability. Inside, the seats and controls were redesigned to make driving more comfortable. By this time, many muscle cars were losing power due to changes in engine tuning, but the GTX mostly held its ground. The standard 440 cubic inch V8 with a 4-barrel carburetor had 370 horsepower, only 5 less than before. The optional 440 cubic inch engine with 3 2-barrel carburetors made 385 horsepower. The top choice, the legendary 426 cubic inch Hemi Fiat 8, stayed at 425 horsepower. The car could be ordered with either a 4-speed manual or a 3-speed automatic transmission. Now, let's talk speed. The GTX could go from 0 to 60 miles per hour in 5.7 seconds and finish the quarter mile in 13.7 seconds at 102 miles per hour. That was a serious performance, but there was a downside. The car gained 170 pounds, which slightly slowed it down compared to earlier models. Some test drivers liked how it was handled, but others found the ride too stiff for daily driving. Despite its weight gain, the GTX still had power and attitude. It kept features like the air grabber hood, which helped bring in fresh air for the engine. Axle ratios went up to 4 points, 1-0 to 1, making it strong off the line. Car magazines at the time praised the GTX for staying true to its muscle car roots, when others were starting to back off. But it did not last. 1971 was the final year for the GTX as its own model. The Roadrunner name continued for a few more years, but it was never the same. The GTX went out while it was still a real muscle car, but somehow, it never became a household name. Number 8, 1974 AMC Javelin AMX 401. The 1971 AMC Javelin AMX is a car that many have mixed feelings about. Some think its wide fenders and bold design look strange, while others love how it stands out. But whether people like the way it looks or not, one thing is clear: it had speed, and somehow, it never became as well known as other muscle cars from its time. American Motors Corporation wanted to compete with the Ford Mustang, so they made the Javelin and AMX. The Javelin was a 4-seater, while the AMX started as a 2-seater, but later became a high-performance version of the Javelin. At 1971, the Javelin got a new look, a longer body, and a slightly wider frame, making it seem even bigger than before. The standard Javelin had a 6-cylinder engine, but the AMX only came with V8 engines. The smallest was a 304 cubic inch engine with 210 horsepower. The next step up was the 360 cubic inch engine, which had either 245 or 285 horsepower, depending on the version. The strongest was the 401 cubic inch engine, making 330 horsepower. This engine had a 4-barrel carburetor, dual exhaust, and a compression ratio of 9.5 to 1. For speed, the 401 took about 8 seconds to go from 0 to 60 miles per hour and completed the quarter mile in 16 seconds. That was impressive for a car not many people talk about today. It had different transmission choices, including a 3-speed manual, a 4-speed manual with a Hurst shifter, and an automatic. In 1972, AMC switched to Chrysler-made automatic transmissions, which were easier to maintain. The Javelin and AMX were made until 1974, with changes each year. Early models had fiberglass hoods with air scoops, but by 1974, they all had flat steel hoods. The interior was always sporty, with bucket seats and wraparound dashboards. Some models even had special designs, like the Pierre Cardin edition, with colorful stripes inside the car. Despite being a powerful and fast car, the Javelin AMX never became as famous as the Mustang or Chevrolet Camaro. But for those who know it, this car was just as exciting and still turns heads today. Number 7, 1972 Ford Galaxie 500 429. The 1964 Ford Galaxie 500 XL had a look that people recognized right away. Its round jet-style taillights had been a Ford trademark since 1959, appearing on models like the Falcon, Thunderbird, and Fairlane. The only time they disappeared was on the 1960 Ford, and that did not go well. Sales dropped, so by 1961, the round taillights were back. But this was the last year for them on the big Fords before designs changed for good. This XL Coupe has a badge on the front fender that says 429, but that engine did not exist until 1969. So, was the engine swapped, or did someone just put on the wrong badge? There's no way to know for sure. The XL trim package was Ford's version of Chevrolet's SS, meaning it came with bucket seats, a center console, and some badges. Unlike Chevrolet, Ford did not offer a 6-cylinder engine for the XL. That was probably a good choice since the Galaxie was a heavy car and would have been too slow with a smaller engine. The standard engine was a 289 cubic inch V8 with 195 horsepower. Optional engines included the 352 cubic inch V8 with 250 horsepower, the 390 cubic inch V8 with 300 horsepower, and the powerful 427 cubic inch V8. The 427 came in 2 versions, making either 410 or 425 horsepower, depending on whether it had 1 or 2 4-barrel carburetors. It was a high-performance engine meant for racing, so very few were sold. It even had a special exhaust system for better airflow. Speaking of speed, the Galaxie XL could go from 0 to 60 miles per hour in 9 seconds. It finished the quarter mile in 17.4 seconds. In 1974, the Galaxie 500 name was used for the last time. By 1975, most of Ford's full-size cars were called LTD, except for the base model, which was renamed Custom 500. That year, all full-size Fords came with power front disc brakes as standard. Number 6, 1970 Oldsmobile Rally 350. Back in the year 1970, muscle cars were everywhere. Big engines, big horsepower, and big attention. But not every car got the spotlight. One of the fastest cars that most people have never talked about is the Oldsmobile Rally 350. It was quick, bright yellow from front to back, and built to dodge the expensive insurance costs that were killing the muscle car market. But for some reason, it never really caught on. Oldsmobile made only 3,547 of these. It was meant to be a budget-friendly muscle car that looked fast and drove fast without the sky-high price tag. But the thing that made it different, its bright yellow paint, including yellow bumpers, also made it hard to sell. Some dealers even replaced the yellow bumpers with regular chrome ones just to get them off the lot. Now, let's talk about speed. The Rally 350 came with a 310 horsepower, 350 cubic inch V8 engine. It had a 10.25 to 1 compression ratio and produced 390 pound-feet of torque at 3,200 revolutions per minute. It could go from 0 to 60 miles per hour in 7 seconds flat. On the drag strip, it covered the quarter mile in 15.27 seconds at 94 miles per hour. That was fast for its time, but it didn't get the love it deserved. It came with different transmission options. A 3-speed manual was standard, but most buyers went for the 4-speed Muncie manual, or the 3-speed automatic. The rear axle had a standard 3.23 to 1 gear ratio, but there were optional 3.42 to 1 and 3.91 to 1 ratios for better acceleration. The Rally 350 had sporty suspension, power disc brakes in the front, and rally-style wheels, all designed for fun driving. But people didn't know much about it, and many cars sat unsold into the next year. Today, finding a real one is tricky since the vehicle identification number doesn't confirm if it's genuine. But if you ever see a bright yellow Oldsmobile from 1970, you might be looking at one of the fastest forgotten cars of its time. Number 5, 1973 Ford Gran Torino Sport 429. The 1973 Ford Gran Torino Sport 429 was one of those fast cars that never really got the attention it deserved. While other muscle cars from that time became legends, this one stayed in the shadows. It had the power, the size, and the style. But for some reason, it was never the first name people thought of when talking about fast cars from the 70s. It had a strong and wide front with 4 round headlights and a grille that looked more like a metal gate than a typical car front. The body had smooth lines, and the 2-door sports roof version was the best looking of them all. Inside, the car was big and comfortable, with options for either bench seats or bucket seats. The seats were made of a new kind of vinyl that let air pass through, so they did not trap heat or smell like older vinyl seats did. There was also an option for wood-like trim on the dashboard to give it a little more style. Now, let's talk about speed. The car had different engine options, but the 429 cubic inch V8 was the most powerful. It had 360 horsepower, which might not sound like much compared to earlier muscle cars, but it had a lot of torque, which helped it move fast. It could go from 0 to 60 miles per hour in 8 to 10 seconds, quarter miles in 16 seconds, with an impressive top speed of 130 miles per hour. No doubt that made it faster than many other big cars from that time. Driving this car felt smooth, and it handled well for its size. It had a strong suspension system that made it feel stable on the road, and Ford even offered a special competition suspension package for people who wanted better handling. The Gran Torino Sport also had front disc brakes, which was still a new feature for muscle cars back then. It was built for both speed and comfort, making it one of the best cars of its time. For some reason, this car never became as famous as others. Maybe it was because muscle cars were starting to lose their popularity, or maybe it was just overlooked. But the 1973 Ford Gran Torino Sport 429 was a fast car that should have been a bigger deal. Number 4, 1971 Dodge Super Bee 446 pack. The 1971 Dodge Super Bee 446 pack was a fast car that never got the same attention as some of the other muscle cars from its time. Dodge made this car to be all about performance, but for some reason, it did not become as famous as some of its rivals. This car came with a powerful 440 cubic inch V8 engine, which had 3 2-barrel carburetors. It was part of a special package that made the car even quicker than the standard versions. Dodge wanted to give drivers something built for speed, and they did just that. The car also had a lightweight hood with pins to keep it in place instead of regular hinges and latches. It was a small detail, but it showed how serious Dodge was about making this car faster. Now, let's talk about how fast it really was. The Super Bee could go from 0 to 60 miles per hour in 5.9 seconds. That was incredibly quick for a car of its size. It could also finish a quarter-mile race in 14 points in 2 seconds. Those numbers put it right up there with some of the best muscle cars of its time. The Super Bee was not just about speed. It also had a tough, aggressive design that made it stand out. But despite its looks and performance, it never became as well known as some other Dodge models. Maybe it was because muscle cars were starting to fade in popularity, or maybe it just got lost in the crowd. Whatever the reason, the 1971 Dodge Super Bee 446-pack was a fast car that more people should know about. Number 3, 1975 Chevrolet Laguna S3 400. The 1975 Chevrolet Laguna S3 400 was not the most famous car, but it had its own kind of speed. It was built at a time when muscle cars were starting to slow down, but Chevrolet still gave it a strong engine and a design that stood out. This car came with a 400 cubic inch V8 engine, which was a solid choice for its time. Chevrolet only made around 7,100 Lagunas that year, so finding one was not easy. The car had a unique front end, special grille, and opera window louvers that made it look different from other Chevrolets. It even had a maroon interior with swiveling bucket seats, something not many cars had back then. Now about its speed. The Chevrolet Laguna S3 400 could go from 0 to 60 miles per hour in 10.5 seconds. It could also finish a quarter-mile race in 17.8 seconds. These numbers were not the fastest of the muscle car era, but for the mid-70s, when most cars were getting slower, they still had some power. This car was not just about performance. It had an interesting history. One Laguna found in Delaware was originally white with red stripes, but along the way someone painted it maroon with purplish blue flames. It also lost its original engine, but a Chevrolet fan decided to bring it back to life instead of using it for parts. The restoration took time, but the car ended up with a fresh engine, a smooth paint job, and all the right details. The 1975 Chevrolet Laguna S3 400 may not be a household name, but it was a car that stood out in its own way. Number 2, 1976 Dodge Aspen RT 360. It looked fast. The 1976 Dodge Aspen RT 360 was not the most talked about car, but it had its own way of standing out. Dodge had just finished making the popular Dart, and the Aspen was supposed to carry that success forward. It even won a big award, which helped it sell over 500,000 cars in its first year. But the Aspen had problems. It rusted too fast, had ignition troubles, and was recalled more than any other car at the time. That scared people away. Still, Dodge made a special version, the RT, for those who wanted something a little quicker. It came with sporty stripes, better suspension, and a blackout grille. Some versions even had extra spoilers and fender flares. Now, about speed. The Dodge Aspen RT 360 had a 360 cubic inch V8 engine. It could go from 0 to 60 miles per hour in 9.1 seconds. Its top speed was 115 miles per hour, and it finished a quarter-mile race in 16.8 seconds. That was not the fastest car of the time, but for a car built in the mid-70s, it was a solid number. Even though fewer than 18,000 of these cars were made over 5 years, they never became expensive collectibles. Many were modified over the years, and the ones that stayed original were often forgotten. Today, finding one is rare, but they are still affordable. Prices are low, but for a V8-powered coupe, interest is always there. The Dodge Aspen RT 360 may not be famous, but it is one of those cars that could become more valuable as time goes on. Number 1, 1978 Dodge Magnum XE 400. The 1978 Dodge Magnum XE 400 was one of the last cars to use Chrysler's long-running B platform. It was designed as an upgrade from the Dodge Charger, with a new shape to help in NASCAR racing. The goal was to make it more aerodynamic, and while it was better than the older Charger, that was not a hard thing to achieve. This car came with a few different engine choices, but the most powerful option was the 400 cubic inch V8. It was only available in 1978, making it a rare pick. Chrysler stopped making big block engines later that year, so by 1979, the biggest option was a 360 cubic inch V8. Now for speed. The Dodge Magnum XE 400 could go from 0 to 60 miles per hour in 11.6 seconds. It completed a quarter-mile race in 18.6 seconds. Those numbers might not seem impressive today, but for a large car built in the late 70s, they were solid. One of the most famous drivers, Richard Petty, raced the Magnum in NASCAR. He did well, but he was not a big fan of the car. He once said it was too hard to control at 190 miles per hour. After a while, Petty and other racers switched to different brands. Today, only 2 NASCAR Magnums are left, one in a museum and other is privately owned. Even though the Dodge Magnum XE 400 had a short run, it still has its place in history. It was a fast, bold attempt at keeping Chrysler in the race world, even if it did not last long. I hope you enjoyed this video. For more amazing car series, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel.